Welcome to Godless Panther's analysis of the creationist cult Answers in Genesis and its leader Ken Ham. I'll start this with a quote from Albert Einstein which reads, "All our science, measured against reality, primitive and childlike, and yet it is the most precious thing we have." I first came across this quote in The Demon-Haunted World by Carl Sagan. In the first chapter of this book, Sagan described the scientific method, that which enables us to separate reality from fantasy, science from pseudoscience, and the ability to begin to gain understanding as to how the universe works without reliance on dogma and superstition. There are, however, some subcultures that have established a structure in which science and education is the enemy. It is not the scientific method that is the most precious thing they have. It is a collection of sacred lies. What I am describing is one definition of a cult. A cult for our purposes here will be defined as a society that is isolated from the larger culture, at least to some degree, and the knowledge base of the subculture is primarily formed by a strict and unquestioning adherence to authoritarian dogmatism, which usually revolves around and is dependent upon a particular leader. So I will proceed with the deepest, darkest secrets of Answers in Genesis and its crazy leader, Ken Ham. The research that I have compiled on AIG is based on the last couple of years in which I infiltrated the group and worked at the Creation Museum in Kentucky. They never found out that I was actually a spy. I'm just kidding. The information is actually compiled from material that is posted on the AIG website as well as other articles, discussions, and videos on the subject. I'll start by discussing two videos that were created by Ken Ham. The first of which is a complaint about Bill Nye, who provided a public service announcement urging people to provide our children with real science education rather than indoctrinate them with nonsense. That nonsense being creationism. The second video was mainly just a whine fest in which Ham complains about the responses that he received from the first video on Bill Nye. When analyzing a piece of propaganda, I like to start off by identifying the target audience. Who is this for? In the case of Ken Ham's videos, they are clearly for those who are already indoctrinated into his cult. He is not talking to anybody else, clearly just to his sheep. The videos are posted publicly, but they are intended for those who already believe Ken Ham's bullshit. Okay, I'm not going to go over these lies point by point, debunking each one. All of these lies have been debunked countless times over many years. So, why are creationists still spouting the very same lies over and over, knowing full well that they are being dishonest? This goes back to the term that I used earlier, sacred lies. What I mean by this is that believing and repeating a certain set of lies is imperative to the structure and doctrine of the AIG cult, which is built like the proverbial house of cards. If a member of this cult allows himself to question and doubt any of these lies, then the whole structure will begin to crumble. With this in mind, let's examine the first video in which Ham starts off by calling Bill Nye the humanist guy because Nye won the Humanist of the Year award in 2010. Perhaps we can call Ken Ham the Upchucky guy because he won the Upchucky Award from National Center for Science Education in 2011. Anyway, within the confines of this subculture, the term humanist is a boogeyman term, a scare tactic. Ham declares that Bill Nye has an agenda to get kids not to believe in God. The implication here is that if one is to accept the scientific theory of evolution, then one must reject the concept of an almighty whatnot. This lie is really important to the cult structure. It serves several purposes. First, it establishes a thick wall between the in-group and the out-group. Then it increases the level of paranoia. Ham is telling his sheep that Bill Nye cannot be trusted. He is part of a conspiracy. He has an agenda to take their children away and turn them into the enemy. And he wants to do this by teaching them a bunch of anti-God stuff. So then, for those of us on the other side of Ham's wall, the obvious question, what about those people who believe in a boundless being and accept real science? To try and get an idea as to how the Hamites deal with this, let's take a look at the AIG website. The most direct article that AIG posts which deals with this topic is an older one from 1989 by Duane Gish. It is called, "Is It Possible to Be a Christian and an Evolutionist?" Those of us outside the creationist subculture simply look at the issue realistically. The answer is yes. Create a simple two-circle Venn diagram. One circle represents the population of Christians, the other circle represents the population of those who accept evolution. Is there a percentage in the overlap? Of course. Creationists will not look at the question realistically because they are indoctrinated to fear and loathe reality. After a bunch of gibberish and irrelevant Bible verses, Gish concludes his article with the following paragraph. Yes, one can be a Christian and an evolutionist, but such a position is both scientifically and biblically untenable. The Lord Jesus took a literal view of Genesis. The theory of evolution is dishonoring to God as creator, and its teaching leads to a disastrous secularizing of society. So I guess that means that one can be a Christian and accept evolution, but if one does that, then one can't really be a Christian, so one cannot be. It's deliberately deceptive. Gish is trying to avoid the old no true Christian fallacy by rephrasing it, and that is done over and over throughout the AIG website. They have a section of articles that describe how it is dangerous for a Christian to accept evolution. They declare that not interpreting Genesis as absolute truth is liberalism, on and on. In a quick and dirty little nutshell, they really think that one can't be a true Christian and accept evolution. Don't use mixed metaphors, it's bad form. So, back to Ham on Nye. Remember that this propaganda is intended only for Ken Hamians, not for those outside the wall. Ken Ham goes on lying about Bill Nye after saying that he has an agenda to get kids not to believe in God and that they came from slime. Ken declares that Bill Nye is not really a scientist because he was a mechanical engineer, and that Bill Nye really doesn't understand science. Pretty much everything in Ken's videos is a lie. There are different types of sacred lies. Some are just a little off, such as, yes, Bill Nye was a mechanical engineer. However, contrary to what Ken Ham says, that is a type of scientist. Some lies are just bizarre, completely divorced from reality, like some anti-God conspiracy that Ken Ham just pulled out of his ass. Some lies are just gibberish, nonsense. To get an idea of that, read a few articles that are posted on the AIG website. Then there are a set of projection lies. This is where Ken projects his own agenda onto those he hates, and we go through the looking glass, and everything that Ken Ham says is precisely the opposite of reality. We enter another dimension in which scientists who have dedicated their lives to the discovery of reality, published volumes on the subject, created and conducted rigorous experimentation, are a bunch of cross-eyed drooling morons. And crazy cult leaders are the real scientists who would be winning those Nobel Prizes in science if not for that fucking godless conspiracy. Ken Ham claims that he is the one who is encouraging critical thinking, teaching children how to think and not what to think. And it is people like Bill Nye who are indoctrinating children with dogmatic, rigid superstition. Every day is opposite day with the hamster. But it gets better. Ken Ham can read your mind. He knows that you really know that he's absolutely right about everything, but you reject the truth because of your sinful nature. You have no basis for morality, you have no purpose or meaning in your life. That pretty much locks it up for Ken's faithful bootlickers. They will not listen to anyone who is critical of the cult. Why should they pay any attention to such vile creatures? Meaningless, purposeless, degenerate, immoral, sinful deniers of God. So I'm going to recap the major lies from the first two videos here. 1. The theory of evolution is synonymous and interchangeable with atheism. 2. Ken Ham and his mindless minions are the only ones who can be trusted to determine what a real Christian is. 3. Ken and his programmed robots are the only ones who can declare what real science is. 4. The hamster and his cult members are the only ones who have a real sense of morality, purpose, meaning, etc. 5. Ken and his followers are being persecuted and suppressed because the rest of us can't handle the real truth. These are the major lies that are important for the continued indoctrination of the cult members. But that's not what I came to tell you about. I came to talk about deconversion. Here's where we go to part 2.